Hello, hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Robin Woods. I am the founder of Wine and Mastermind. Thank you all for joining the Power Talk live this evening. I have an amazing guest, a boss mom, here with me, and this is our discussion that we're going to be talking about today. Is going to be around pivots with purpose, and I thought it would be a really good opportunity for Leslie Clark to come on and talk about this particular topic because what you're going to learn is that she owns a children's book publishing company. And some of you, and I'm not even going to say some of you, if you've been following me for a while, you know that my husband and I, we actually wrote a children's book. And so it's crazy because I always get people who contact me and they ask me about writing a children's book, just as a passive source of income, just to have, some kind of backup, right? Because let's face it, today in today's economy, I believe that we all need options. We all need to have some type of passive income under our belts, especially as we're growing our businesses, as we're growing our careers, whatever it is, right? And so this is why this particular topic today is so important for those of you who are watching. And I'm not going to give away too much, but I do want to open up the floor, Leslie, for you to introduce yourself and let everyone know who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Robin, for having me on your platform. I feel like I should have had some wine with me, but next time when we do part two, I'll make sure to have
Yes, yes.
But I am Leslie Clark. I am a wife, a mom, an engineer, sister, aunt, all of those things, friend, and an entrepreneur. And so this is something that I've always kind of been passionate about. I was raised in a family of entrepreneurs, so it was kind of installed in me in a very, very young age from what I saw from my grandparents as well as my uncles and my parents. So this was kind of something that I knew was going to come. And I, by being an engineer and practicing and working in that field, it has allowed me to fund my passion. So I'm not ready to officially do it full time. I'm hoping to get there very soon, but it's been able to allow me to wear multiple hats. So for that, I'm super grateful. Outside of anything else about me, I love people. I love to give back. I'm very active in my community. I love to shop, and I am a Leo through and through. So I'm a Leo's.
Okay, Leo. Okay, Leo. I can't relate to that. I'm an Aquarius, but I do. I have a lot of Leo friends and family. So yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, Leslie. So one thing that I thought that was so interesting, you and I, we chatted maybe a couple of months back, right? And your engineering background. The thing that really stuck out to me was, like how you said, your business in terms of what you're doing is being funded by, your engineering career. And I used to work with engineers, so I actually worked in the industry with a ton of engineers. I loved it, and I just love the way engineers think. Like I honestly feel like my daughter is like I feel like she could be an engineer just the way she thinks. She's very innovative and creative with her thinking. Um, which I can actually see looking at how that could be a really strong link to writing books, right? Kind of tapping into the creative aspect. So I want to know from you, what made you decide to actually make that shift? Like, what made you shift or even pivot into, okay, I have this career, but I want to start writing books? Like, what was the thing that made you even start that process?
So just even to kind of fast forward, when I was growing up, I thought I was going to be a journalist. I thought I've always had a gift of gab. I've always had a gift or a love for books and reading. And then my mom had me intern at a news station, and it was not me in front of the camera. It was me holding cameras. It was me writing a whole bunch of stories. And I was like, oh, so you don't graduate and go right in front of the camera? There's a lot of work. Then they also don't make a lot of money. And typically out of school, you go to these like very small markets. I was not trying to be a nighttime anchor in Wyoming. So I was like, quickly pivot. So I was good at math and science. I took the engineering route, but my love for children, my love for reading and writing always kind of stayed around. And it wasn't until I made the pivot after I gave birth to my son. And being an engineer, I was very type A. I have checklists for checklists. And when you're somebody who is governed by a schedule and you have a child and you understand that they're going to mess up your whole entire schedule, I felt like I was kind of losing myself. I was going through a whole bunch of, probably associated with postpartum, And I said, this is the time to pull that trigger. Like, I needed a project to make me feel like me, or to remind me of who I was pre-mom, because you have this title. And I think when you have this baby, everybody thinks that you go away and it's mom mode and it's 100%. And I think that you should be that, but you have to also feed the person that you were, or the new person that you've become, because you'll lose yourself. And then your child is 10 years old and you're like, who is this husband? Who is this man in my house? Who is this other life? Like, all your friends fall off. So like, I wanted to make sure there was a way for me to feed Leslie. So I finally pulled the trigger. And there were some other factors, which is why I did the Blended Family series, or the stock book. So there were other reasons for that, but the postpartum journey and me trying to navigate that new title and new role in my life was how I officially took the plunge.
Oh, so I love that. I love it so much, because oftentimes, especially for moms, and this is what I really try to encourage, people who I work with, even close family and friends, like, find a passion, because a lot of times, and for many of us, especially in our generation, because what we saw in the previous generation was, a lot of sacrifice, right? Which, I'm thankful to God, right? That my mom, my grandmother, and, those that came before us were, very adamant about putting their entire life into our well-being, right? Just making sure that, we were nurtured, we had everything we had. But then also, one thing that I saw that was a gap, which is honestly, that got me even writing my book, right? Like my Boss Moms Move Differently book, was that, a lot of us have been operating feeling as if, like, oh, once you have a child, you have to lose yourself, right? Like, you got to lose yourself. You got to disconnect. Whatever you want, it doesn't matter. Whatever you like, it doesn't matter, right? That'll come later. And so some of us feel like we got to put it off. We got to put it on hold. And so I'm glad to hear that you were able to recognize, right? You were able to recognize, like, okay, this is just not adding up. I got to figure out a way to tap into who Leslie is in this process, so that I can be a better version of myself. And I experienced something very similar. And I would agree with you that I do believe that some of it probably was due to postpartum. Like, I didn't know it until I got out of it. But I did, looking back, I'm like, dang, that was postpartum, like that I had been experiencing. So I'm curious to know, if you don't mind sharing, because there may be some women out there who may be watching this, and maybe, I know you shared the example about your type A, right? So you're used to things being a little bit more structured, right? And so, of course, when a child comes, it's like your whole world feels like it's falling apart, right? So, like, if you don't mind sharing, maybe what were some of those other triggers for you? What were some of those other things that may have caused you to make shifts, and to just make the decision that, hey, I gotta show up for Leslie. I gotta show up for Leslie.
So I think it was, like I said, I think the postpartum was the biggest kind of trigger for me. And I think it was, like, you're looking at it from an umbrella system, that was what it was. And it was just, again, that was my first child that I birthed. I have a blended daughter. We don't really use the term, but I have another daughter by marriage. And it's just different from, like, actually carrying and pushing it out and being, like, solely responsible in partnership with my husband for this human being. And I really had to wrap my mind about it. And I think it was the therapy sessions. I also had a traumatic delivery situation. And so all of that compounded with me going to therapy and, like, being reflective of, your life has changed. Mm-hmm. And I also think, what you kind of alluded to, what some of our previous family members have gone through, whether it's generations back, and I didn't have a safe space to even vent, because I think a lot of people say, oh, you should just be appreciative. Like, oh, you got to glow. Everybody can't have a child. Everybody can't do this. So you should be, what are you complaining for? I did this and I worked and I still made dinner. Like, you got this. And I'm like, it's 2023 though. Why am I suffering when I have all these resources and I have a very able-bodied husband? Like, I didn't make this child by myself, and nor did I get married to be a single mother. So how does that work? So I'm like, no, I need to demand support, demand partnership, and all of this. And I said, in order to do that, I can be vocal, but I also have to make sure I don't lose myself in the process, and that's what I felt like. I literally felt like I was drowning. Like, I was on an island by myself. We're in Georgia. All of our families in Florida. So I was doing this by myself, and it was in the midst of COVID. So he was born in 2021. Of course, I've had contacts, our associates, our friends that I have, acquired by being up here, but also people want to hold your baby in the daytime. Like, no, I need you to watch him at nighttime so I can sleep. Like, I'm not a vampire. So like they wanted to come and just hold him in the most like inopportune time that really wasn't helping me. Then I'm like, I don't know what you do outside of this. So like, I don't want you bringing any germs in the house, COVID. Like, so it was a lot of factors. And I felt like I was almost kind of, I didn't want to suffer in silence. And so I was being very vocal, like, hey, I need help. Like, help me, help me, help me. And the therapy helped. But the biggest trigger, like I said, for me to write the books was that postpartum in myself. And then the other, I said the sub trigger was the topic. So, like I said, I come from a blended family. My daughter was aware that I was pregnant with her brother. What does that look like? Because at this point, like I call her, oh, hey, baby. That's what I call her. She's like, but you about to have another baby. Like, what does that mean? I said, but you my first baby. So I'm like, I need to find books to help her through this. I had chicken noodle soup for the soul. I had this, I had that. But she didn't have anything. I went on Amazon, I went on Google. There was nothing that existed. And if it did, it was like animals, but it wasn't anything that reflected what my family looked like. So I was like, okay, God, I got to write this myself. So we're doing a blended family series. And so I wanted her to be able to see herself, see her family dynamic in a positive and healthy manner, because a lot of times blended families can be a very taboo subject. There's always Twitter debates on, I'm not dating a woman with kids, I'm not dating a man with kids, but it happens. So life happens, and how do we effectively navigate that? And so by my books, I'm hoping that the adults who typically start the drama in the blended families will read and understand that it's all about the kids. So we are talking about different installments and milestones, and it's not all rainbows and glitter that we have planned, because family is a lot of work. So I think those were the two main triggers of the pivot, and then specifically how we decided on the topics for the first couple books.
Ooh, I love it. Finding purpose through your pain, right? Like finding purpose. I love that so much. So kind of recapping what you just said in terms of, so we understand what those triggers were, what they, how they may come up in conversations, right? They may come up in conversations from other family members. Sometimes it comes up from our own personal self, right? Like us feeling as if we're drowning, we're losing ourselves. And then the other one is just simply postpartum, right? Like, and a lot of times postpartum is such a hard thing to really pinpoint, when you're in it. But I think to your point, as you mentioned earlier, it's more of like that umbrella, right? So it's umbrella, but then there's so many other layers that may come with it. And then in terms of how you were able to kind of make that shift, it sounds like you tapped into therapy, which I can highly recommend to anybody, any mom. I feel like everybody needs therapy, okay? Everybody. So I appreciate you sharing that. So the therapy journey, you shared, having, asking for help, right? Like actually, because a lot of times we don't, feel, some of us are just too prideful to ask for help. Sometimes we feel like, oh, I don't want to put this burden on other people, right? But it literally takes a village. Like this thing is not like, when you think about how we were raised, how we came up, right? Oftentimes it was a village. You had other family members, you had other church members, you had neighborhood, like somebody in the area to kind of help. And I feel like I was reading this research around how more and more Americans, we're becoming more isolated, right? Like because of the fact, and I know COVID probably played a very significant role in that, but a lot of us, it really takes being intentional about asking for help and, actually seeking, building community, building village, to really help foster that environment that you're looking for. So I want to know from you in terms of, so you've got to a point where you start, writing your books, which I love the purpose behind it. It makes complete sense. You got to a point where you're writing your book and you want to make it purposeful because you want your children and other children who may be struggling with kind of understanding what is this, right? But then you're working. Are you working at this time, or are you working or?
Yes and no. So thank God I have really great benefits. So I was actually able to take 5.5, close to 6 months off.
Oh,
so I was able to kind of do the manuscript, get some of the editing, partner with the illustrator. So it was probably 50% done while I was still off. And then I pushed the other half to production while I was back working. But we have a ramp back program with my job too. So I was only working like 20 hours a week for another 8 weeks. So I was probably full-time officially when the book dropped, but throughout the beginning processes, I was kind of partially in and out of work.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. But yeah, you're right. That's a blessing. So I mean, now that you're back in work, right? Like you're working more full time, and not sure if you're working. You got clients. Are you working with other people right now, or is that something that
So
you've been
I
doing?
am expanding the publishing company aspect of it because at my vendor setup, a lot of people are coming up and asking how to take it from A to Z. And so what I've noticed is that a lot of people have a story to tell. A lot of people have a great idea, whatever it may be, but they don't know or have the time or the resources to take it from an ideation to actual a palatable book. So I am in the process of doing consultations. I am allowing people to learn from the bruises that I've acquired on this journey on how to effectively find an illustrator, how to find a affordable editor for your doc. Because again, just because the kids book doesn't mean you want to have grammatical errors or have any things like that. You want somebody to look over your stuff. So little things. I also have like scheduling packages where you know if you have a projected launch date, how to work backwards to make sure that you stay on track. So little things that I used from being type A and setting up that helped me stay on track. I'm offering that. I'm still doing trial because I really don't know even how much to charge or what that to look like because I'm still new and dabbling, but I don't want that to be the reason why someone doesn't have the opportunity to share their story. So
Come
I
on.
am in the process of expanding that, but currently right now I don't have any clients. It's just full-time work and then me furthering. I have a couple other books coming, so doing that for the most part.
Come on, books, and come on, purpose. So obviously, there's going to be more for you in store in terms of helping other people. Definitely writing more books. What would be, let's say, three things that maybe you could recommend to? And a lot of times with our audience, we really I work more with the married professional women, right? Like they're trying to raise a family, they don't want to lose themselves, right? Because sometimes it's hard, right? Sometimes we have to reevaluate this pretty often, right? To really understand, like, am I losing myself in this process, right? Because things change. So what would be your recommendation? Three things that maybe you could share to help someone who maybe wants to start a side business with, let's say, writing a book. And maybe they just don't have a lot of time, right? They don't have a lot of time. They're so busy wearing all these hats, and they're maintaining their career, growing in their career, right? They're busy. What would be those three things that you would recommend for them to do to even get the ball moving, to get started right now?
So to get the ball moving, I would say number one would be to communicate with your partner, whoever that is, whether you have, because you never know. They need to know what they're in for with some support aspect. So like my husband can be an accountability. So I have to make sure stuff is fleshed out before I bring it to the table because he gonna chew it up. Like, what did you think about this? What about this? Da 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 da. Like he's a sounding board. So I always say like you just I say it in a funny way, but like, you so negative, like you negative Nancy. But I think he's using that to be like, because I'm very impulsive, let's go buy this island. And he was like, buy an island? How you going? So he's kind of like that sounding board to say, let's vet this a little bit more. So I would say if you have a partner, you have somebody that you trust, bounce it off of them first so they can kind of help let you flesh it out. Number two would be utilize your resources. Like I'm a strong proponent of networking. And so you don't have to recreate the wheel if you don't. And putting little plugs out there and finding out who does what you need, because you can build a solid team internally and that can kind of save you on some of that upfront cost where you can maybe get something at a discounted rate or from a referral or something like that, because you may already have everything that you need in-house. I think the third thing would be a budget, probably identifying what you really want and plan that out, because depending on if it's a book or whatever the case, you need to understand what the upfront cost may be and the reap and the reward, because that may be able to help scale what that launch looks like. So you may have a big dream that you may have to do in phases because depending on your financial situation. So I think those will probably be the starter kit or the top three things that I would say to start out to make sure that you can maintain that momentum from a realistic standpoint.
Sounds like you got a good starter kit to offer to other people. I'm just saying, that sounded really good. And again, for me, going through the process of writing a children's book, I could see all three of those points being super relative. I'm sorry, super relevant to starting that journey, starting that process. I love the last point that you made about you may have a really large goal, right, in terms of what that end goal is, but sometimes it makes sense to just kind of chop it up in phases. That's kind of the way I operate too. Like I don't like that you just try to tackle everything. Again, when you're a high achiever, Sometimes it can be very easy to just try to go full force into everything. And I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs or people who have started side hustles make those mistakes of just trying to put everything in. They're going all the way in, and then they burn themselves out because, again, we ran all these hats. And so I would encourage, to your point, Leslie, I would kind of piggyback off of that point of giving yourself grace, right? And allowing yourself to break it up in phases in terms of if it's writing a book or if it's just starting some type of side business, side hustle, so that it doesn't get so overwhelming. Because one thing I learned when it comes to writing a book, or really any business, you can write it all day, right? But you still have to market it.
Yes.
And that's how you make sales from marketing. And so a lot of people, they get so fixated on the point of, oh, I want to write a book, right? Because and the people I've talked to, they have really good intentions, great purposes behind it. But remember that there is an aspect of it that can take energy. It's going to take work. It can still take time and commitment just to simply sell the book.
Yes.
Right?
Know your market. Know
your market. Yes.
Do your research. Like if you want to make this big children's book on a topic and you go on Amazon and there's 1 million books on there, how can you tweak the title or make it more catchy or do X, Y? Like, so the research piece and utilizing resources is super important. So everybody has a great idea, of course, and we're not going to diminish your idea, but there may be that feedback from your group could be, you have to market this different, or you have to figure out a way how to make your title or your concept look like it's different from the rest, because there's a lot of books out there.
Yeah.
A lot of books out there. So you have to know your market and know your audience, because if no one's going to, it could be a great book, but if no one's going to buy it, that's a lot of upfront costs and you're not going to recoup those expenses.
Right. So I want to ask you this question because I like to go through this in terms of mindset, because oftentimes the thought process of when we are working in a corporate career, right, versus like doing our own thing, right? Like when you have a side hustle, you have a side business. Sometimes I love the freedom aspect of it in terms of, because you can literally create however you can make it your own, however you want to make it. But with that comes some mindset shifts in the process, right? Sometimes that can look like we can doubt ourselves because maybe we have been operating as an engineer, right? Or in a profession for so long in a particular career. And then we start tapping out into uncharted territory. Sometimes that could be a little uncomfortable at times. So I'm curious to know if you've ever experienced maybe those moments of self-doubt, those moments of maybe imposter popping up when it was time for you to actually even start promoting your book, right? To people around you, family and friends. Like what did you encounter and how were you able to overcome, some of the self-doubt or some of the imposter at times?
I would say, I wouldn't know. It probably was a combination of imposter / self-doubt, because I think a lot of times I learned this lesson, I wouldn't say the hard way, but I hear it a lot of times where people say like people who you don't know will probably go harder for you than your inner circle. And so I think I got a lot of initial momentum, like, oh, this is great. Like, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to support this. And then it comes down to, there's people that I'm meeting off the street that are like, oh, your book is so amazing. And they're sharing it or they're doing X, Y, Z. So I think a lot of times there's different roadblocks as you go through that. Oh, I have this great idea and everybody's behind it. And then when it comes to fruition, you're like, I thought you said you were going to be on the street team. And they're like, oh, I got this, and the third. So you then become like one band, one sound at that point. So, or one man team, I should say, not one band, one sound. But I think that was probably where it was, because again, you've made this book, you've put this money into it, and you're seeing these sales not take off in the way that you want to. And I think that goes back to the marketing aspect. Like, what avenues am I missing? Let me go back to the drawing board. Like, am I doing the best with my social media presence? Like, some of these doubts or imposter syndromes being introduced from self-inflicted things that I'm not doing. So I had to kind of reevaluate, like, am I really marketing this to the best of my ability? And I will say I wasn't, because I'm a full-time employee. I'm a mom, new mom, toddlers running around the house. So I definitely wasn't giving it my all. So I had to scale back my expectations and say, hey, even if I can get a couple sales a week, that's in the right direction, and I can compound on that next week. Or, hey, I need you to send out 2 emails to influencers or to some Black-owned bookstores this week. So I had to make myself have realistic goals that I can check off, and at least I will have a clear conscience that I did everything I could in that week to garner some sales versus saying I'm gonna be in Oprah's Vineyard interviewing on her bestsellers book by next August. That may not be as attainable as, hey, I sold 100 books this month, you know? So just, I think I went out of the gate like I'm going to be this best-selling author and I'm going to do XYZ. And I had to humble myself and say, Rome was not built in a day, Leslie. Like, back to the drawing board. Let's figure out what this is, because this is truly a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so I don't plan on stopping. And I know the content and like the purpose behind my books. And I know that there's an audience, and I just got to make sure I tap in and find that right person that could potentially take it to that next level.
So good. I mean, really what it boils down to, and again, from personal experience, is that when you're building a business, and this is a hard lesson for me as well, when you're building a business, if you are only trying to sell to your family and friends, right? It's not necessarily, I'm not saying that you're not going to be successful in what you're doing. I'm saying that it's not going to be the thing to sustain you, right? And if you really want to really play the long game when it comes to running any kind of business. So I would agree with you wholeheartedly. Leslie, I want to ask, what are some future plans, maybe, or aspirations that you have right now in terms of where you're going to be taking your business over, let's say, the next year, over the next 5 years? What does that look like for you? What are some projects you're working on?
So that is a great question. Thank you for asking that. So I think within the next year, I would love to take the consulting aspect of the company to the next level, because I've met and interacted with a lot of people who have some really great ideas. And even if it's just to build up my experience with that, I want to support them in allowing those books to come alive. So that's, I think, the main goal. The other projects that I'm working on, and it's crazy because I was tiptoeing about posting about what's coming, and then affirmative action got overturned. And so I'm like, oh, this one. So I'm working on an HBCU series because I want to plant that seed with kids. And I feel like if you aren't coming from a family or a household that has an HBCU alumni, or your parents are, you're not in close proximity to one, you don't know about it. Like, I'm in Georgia. We have a lot of HBCUs here, but everybody wants to be a Bulldog. Everybody wants to be a Yellow Jacket. And I'm like, we have so much rich history here. My husband graduated from a HBCU. I'm affiliated by default, but I'm go hard for the HBCU that, you know, we support, Go Rattlers. But people aren't talking about it. And I'm hoping that, you know, we get back to pouring into ourselves. And so I have an HBCU coloring book coming out that highlights a lot of prominent HBCUs and their respective alumni, because a lot of these kids play with different things, are aware of these individuals, and don't know that they graduated from HBCUs. So I want to kind of bring it full circle to say, hey, there's a lot of dope people, past, present, and future, who are either at a HBCU, graduated from HBCU, and you love them, and you don't know that they went to a school. So while you're pursuing these PWIs, which there's nothing wrong with that, because I'm an alumni one, but there are other options, I will say that, other great options that we need to be adding to that conversation when it comes to college. And so I think that's going to be the next children book series. And then I'm also working on a young professional book. I've made a lot of mistakes in my career, and I want to prevent the next generation of going through that. I've been mentoring a lot of Gen Z folks, and I love them, but there is a sense of kind of entitlement to that generation. And Rome, this is a very microwave situation. So corporate America is not an overnight type thing. Like, you need to be able to communicate effectively. You need to know how to manage up. How do you negotiate salaries? How do you, you know, jump from job to job to increase that salary? And I see that generation is very knowledgeable, but some of the personable skills are not there. And so I'm hoping that I can kind of take some of that millennial, and I have a couple C-suite family members who have offered to be some ghostwriters on the book. And so I want to create, and not an elaborate read, but like maybe 10 to 20 steps of things that they can do to take their career to the next level, from lessons learned from more experienced professionals to kind of help them. And that is geared toward all young professionals, but my market is for people that look like me, because I know we need that conversation. A lot of my counterparts who don't look like me, they are raised to understand what that dynamic looks like. And if I had that same kind of footing, I think I would have been able to the first 5 years of my career would probably been a lot easier than they were. And so I'm hoping to prevent that and take that trajectory for other young professionals a little bit faster, a little bit farther than I did, because I lack of knowledge and experience.
I love that so much, Leslie. I love it. And again, I said this earlier, but I just love how you are very strategic about building a purpose behind, right? Like everything that you're doing, and you want to make it impactful, right? It's not just writing a book. It's something that has a purpose behind it. And honestly, when it comes to running a business, a lot of times those are the things that kind of keep you in it in the long game. So kudos to you for like getting it, girl. Like I just love it, and I definitely want you to share with everyone where they can find you, where if anybody wanted to purchase a copy of your books, where can they go, and how can they stay connected?
Awesome. So thank you so much. You guys can follow me on Instagram. The book page is Camsden, which is CAMSDEN _ pub, PUB. You can also follow me if you would like. Less is more 88, because less is always more. One S in the less. You can also go to my website, which is leslienclark.com, to purchase the books. All of my books are also currently on Amazon. So if you're an Amazon junkie like I am, you can get them from Amazon, and they'll be there tomorrow. So.
Yes, and I'm just gonna go ahead and throw it out there. If you listen, if you picked up what Leslie dropped down earlier about the 3 ways, there's 3 simple strategies. If you are busy, if you are wanting to create something new, right, in terms of a book, a children's book, because I talked to so many people, and I'm like, that's not my space. That's not my way. I did it. But it was only for the purposes of, I think, kind of to your point about, I wanted my children to see what was possible for them, that they could see that they had options. They could see that, you don't have to wait to get permission, right, to create something new. And so it was more to it on that side versus us like building a business around it. And I'm grateful that we had that opportunity. But Leslie sounds like she's already, she kind of knows the ins and out of what's going on with the book industry, with the children's book publishing industry. So reach out to her. I don't know if you're okay with people DMing you, but yes,
all the questions.
If you got questions, and I would send them your way too, because like I say, I've had a lot of people reach out, even to this day. We wrote our book in 2021. And I still have people reaching out to me, and I'm like, y'all, I got a whole new book. This is nonfiction. I'm not in the fiction children's book industry at all. So definitely reach out to Leslie. Leslie, thank you so much for just sharing your wisdom. This has been so good, and I know I kept you on a little bit longer than what we said, but it was amazing. Everybody, please reach out to Leslie, and we will see you all again next week on Power Talk Live. We'll see you soon. Remember to always move differently. I have to start saying that. I put it in my signatures, but I have to remember to start saying that at the end of my lives. Remember to always move differently. I'll talk to you guys soon.